Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on root cause analysis and systemic corrective action. My name is Shannon Craddock, and I'm the Programs and Accreditations Manager at Perry Johnson Registrars. And I hope you enjoy today's content. A couple of administrative announcements to kick things off. All participants have been muted to ensure sound quality. And a copy of the slides and as well as a recording will be made available on our website at www.pjr.com within 24 to 48 hours from the conclusion of today's webinar. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to field those at the end of today's training. Kindly type them into the question or chat feature and I'll answer as many as I can in the time allotted. Without further ado, let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about why we picked this particular topic. And this actually is one of our most popular webinars that we have. So we'll be talking about the reason that we repeat this so often. We'll then talk about a well-written audit finding, which really sets the foundation for discipline problem solving. We'll talk about actions taken to correct or corrections. We'll talk about root cause analysis, and we'll focus on one technique, the why technique or the 5 why technique. We'll talk about corrective actions or actions taken to prevent recurrence. And we'll also talk about preventive actions and then sound verification activities, ensuring that the implemented corrective action is in fact effective. So why are we doing this? Why this particular topic? We want your organization to improve. I'm a firm believer there should be a strong correlation between third-party audit performance and how you're doing in the eyes of your customers. Keep in mind that the purpose of a management systems audit isn't to convince the auditor to write as few nonconformities as possible. It's to take those nonconformities that are proven to exist and take systemic corrective action for each and every instance that's found. And then we'll see the stronger correlation. As you're preventing recurrence, your performance will improve, not only in third-party audits, but in the eyes of your customers. So a well-written audit finding should have 3 distinct parts: the statement of nonconformity, objective evidence to assist in understanding the breadth and depth of that statement, and then a clear citation of the requirement not being met. Audit findings that do not contain these 3 parts should not be written by PGR auditors and should not be accepted by our clients. In fact, you have my permission to hand the finding back to an auditor if it does not contain those 3 parts. PGR auditors may also write opportunities for improvement, or you may have an internal audit program that allows opportunities for improvement. These should exist only as statements. There should not be a citation of a requirement not being met, because then it would be a nonconformity as opposed to an opportunity for improvement. So let's talk about some pitfalls with the statement of nonconformity. So often, the nonconformity recorded is not the true problem, but it's a symptom of the problem. So we must be careful to express the issue as being at a system level. If the problem is expressed in terms of a particular person or incident, it's at the symptom level, and we don't want that. And I see both internal and third-party auditors make this mistake. So to put this in everyday terms, let's say you tell somebody, you know what, I'm not feeling well. I've got a sore throat and a fever. Well, that could mean a lot of things. It could mean tonsillitis. It could mean a cold. It could mean strep throat. It could even mean COVID. You're just talking about the symptoms. But somebody can better help you if you say, I'm not feeling well because I have a strep throat infection. Then exactly how to deal with it. So expressing the problem in terms of a issue with the system as opposed to symptoms is really important. So it's important to get to the true problem, the systemic issue, the strep throat infection versus a cold or COVID, in order for the problem-solving efforts to be effective. Fixing symptoms will not stop the issue from recurring. So taking an antibiotic for a cold is going to help, but taking an antibiotic for a strep throat bacterial infection, in fact, will. So it's really important that we understand the true systemic issue for the problem-solving efforts to be effective. It's also important to note that a well-written nonconformity should stand the test of time. Your organization should be able to archive a nonconformity, open it up 10 years later from your directory from a 2020 audit, and understand exactly what the problem was. Okay, so let's illustrate this with a few more examples. Here's a poorly written finding. There was no training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954, indicating competence to run that job. Again, this is expressed as an issue, as a symptom, not the true systemic issue or problem. We're confusing objective evidence with the statement of nonconformity. A better way to write this, the system, and we're using the word system right in our statement. The system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. Objective evidence to assist in understanding. Well, there was no training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954, indicating competence to run that job. And then a clear citation of the requirement that's not being met. In this case, it's ISO 9001 2015 72D. And note, we're carrying that out as far as we can. We're not just saying 72, it's 72D is the better fit. So the better way to write this nonconformity is the system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. Again, we're focusing on the systemic issue and not on a particular incident, that operator in cell 9954. Okay, here's another example of a poorly written finding. Quality auditor in the blue cell was using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. Again, this is a symptom and not the problem. We're talking about one particular person. Again, we're confusing objective evidence with the statement of nonconformity. A better way to write this finding, the document control system is not completely effective because the quality auditor in the blue cell was using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. And a clear citation of the requirement all the way out to the most specific requirement, in this case, 7531A. So a better way to write this, the document control system. Again, that word system is right in the statement of nonconformity. It's not completely effective. We're focusing on the systemic issue and not this particular incident of that one guy in the blue cell. So in summary, when you review a statement of nonconformity written by your internal audit team, a customer, if they're doing an audit, or a PJR auditor, ask, have we distinguished between symptoms and the real problem? Does the final statement of nonconformity get you to focus on a systemic issue? But are there clear objective evidence and a clear citation of a very specific requirement for you to assist in understanding that statement of nonconformity? PJR has an internal document. It's our advisory 3 issued to our auditors that requires all auditors to document any non-fulfillment of a requirement as such. In fact, we tell them it's inexcusable not to do so. There's no benefit for the auditee. If our auditor is walking through and sees an unlabeled bin of scrap parts that just says, go plop a label on that, I won't write it up, they're not doing you any favors. There's no benefit, and this contributes to the diminishment of the integrity of accredited management. So it is our expectation that all nonconformities by PGR auditors need to be documented as previously described. Okay, so let's move on to the problem solving now. We have our well-written statement of nonconformity, objective evidence to assist in understanding, and our auditor has done a good job citing the very specific requirement where we're non-conforming. The first step is to implement a correction or containment action. And these are actions taken with respect to the symptom or incident. So these are incident-specific actions. They're very important and should be taken immediately to stop the symptoms. So if you have a strep throat infection, obviously one of the first things you want to do, maybe even before you can get in to see the doctor, is take something to help your symptoms. Taking Tylenol or Aleve may bring down your fever and ease your sore throat pain. Okay, so corrections typically take one of two forms. The first is we calibrated the gauge or we controlled the form. So treating the very specific symptom that you saw. The second type is adding a layer of inspection to catch any further occurrence until you can figure out what the root cause is and then address that root cause. Keep in mind, however, that when you're adding a layer of inspection to your management system, maybe hiring a third-party company to come in and certify all your products, you're simply adding cost, you're not adding value. Later, we're going to learn that once a corrective action is implemented, then costly added inspections should be able to be removed from your system. So containment actions or corrections should be very specific. So let's consider the examples that we've been following through today's training. The training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954 was updated to reflect his competency to run the job unsupervised. So we've updated that training matrix. Or all copies of the uncontrolled form, the quality auditor in the blue cell, were destroyed. So corrections also need to include an extent analysis. So you not only treat the particular symptom that the auditor cited in their nonconformity, but you need to do a look across. The auditor found one instance, but how many more are there? Essentially, what is the depth and breadth of the problem? So if there was an uncalibrated gauge, you need to assess your entire arsenal of gauges and make sure they're all in a known state of calibration. If you found one training record that was not updated, you need to make sure that all employees' training records are up to date. So an extent analysis tells you that while the auditor has uncovered one or more examples of a non-conforming situation, a single gauge out of calibration, one document that isn't controlled, one training record that isn't updated, you need to be doing a complete look across. So a properly executed and well-written extent analysis would read like this. We verified the two gauges found by the PGR auditor, number 2458 and number 1354. Both were conforming. Our extent analysis included the 213 other gauges in our facility. So we're telling you how many gauges were also in the facility. One of these, which one, number 5858, was found to be out of calibration. It was calibrated and returned to service. No product was measured with this gauge since it was last in a known state of calibration. Now that is a very complete and thorough look across for a finding of that nature. Our nonconformity report form has been modified to include a blank for extent analysis. Use of the PGR form is optional, but if you choose to use your own form, you need to make sure it includes an extent analysis. Otherwise, your nonconformity corrective action responses will get rejected. All right, let's move on to root cause analysis. We're now at the point where we've contained the problem. We've fixed the symptoms, we've added a layer of inspection perhaps. Now we really want to dig in and figure out what is causing the problem. So one common pitfall that I see is that CARs restate the incident for the root cause analysis. This is never acceptable. So I may get a root cause that reads like this. Our organization failed to update the training matrix for the operator running job 9954. And I think, well, of course you failed to update it. I saw that while I was auditing your facility. I told you that. You're not telling me why you failed to update it. Or the quality auditor in the blue cell didn't use the correct form to record the results of first article inspection. Again, I know this. I was auditing your facility and I brought it to your attention. Why was that person not using the right form? We also see, although this is less common, that some corrective action responses give containment actions for the root cause. Also not acceptable. Okay, so if you're checking Instagram or looking at your emails right now, I think is a good time to tune back in. This is the single most important slide in today's presentation. A good root cause analysis answers this question. What in the system failed such that the problem occurred? The focus is on the system, not the incident. So a good root cause analysis asks the question, what in the system failed such that the problem occurred? It's possible that a problem may have multiple root causes, and some problems may have several possible root causes. And if you can't distinguish between a few options for the root cause, all will require a corrective action to be implemented. So you know if you have discovered the root cause, if you can turn the problem off and then on again, just like a light switch. If the problem cannot be turned on and off at will, then the root cause has probably not been found. So I'm going to illustrate this with an example from my previous life working in management systems for a large tier 1 automotive manufacturer. So we had a dual cavity tool that was making left-hand and right-hand parts. It was a very simple injection molding process, and the parts would get molded in the dual cavity tool. They would get dropped by a robot. There would be a simple inspection, maybe trimming some flash, and then the left-hand parts would get packed in the left-hand pack-out box, and the right-hand parts would get packed in the right-hand pack-out box. But we had a lot of issues with General Motors because our operators were putting right-hand parts in the left-hand box and left-hand parts in the right-hand box. So we convened a problem-solving team, but not after we implemented a costly added layer of inspection by bringing in a third-party containment team to sort through all of our pack-out boxes and green sticker the certified stock, thousands and thousands of dollars. Our problem-solving team said, you know what, this manufacturing cell configuration is very narrow. And in fact, when the auditor takes the left-hand and right-hand parts and finishes trimming the flash, the left-hand pack-out box is located directly behind the right-hand pack-out box. It's not a logical orientation where the left-hand pack-out box would be on the left-hand side of the operator's body and the right-hand pack-out box would be on the right-hand side of the operator's body. So we spent several $1,000s moving the manufacturing presses on either side of our manufacturing press in question, reconfiguring the cell. And now we had a more logical orientation of that cell. When the auditor finished trimming flash off the parts, on the left-hand side of their body was the left-hand pack-out box, and on the right-hand side of their body was the right-hand pack-out box. But guess what? The problem did not turn off like a light switch. So we knew we did not have the true root cause. We continued, although it was less often, but we continued to pack left-hand parts in the right-hand pack-out box and vice versa. So there are a lot of different techniques for root cause analysis. I'm going to pick up the story in just a few minutes. is not the fishbone diagram or the 5Y or the Y technique, because sometimes we can get there in 3 Ys, sometimes it takes 4 Ys. So let's take a look at the 2 nonconformities that we've been following throughout the system, this presentation. Remember our statement of nonconformity. The system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. There was no training matrix for the first shift operator running job 9954, indicating competence to run that job. So in the Y technique, we begin asking why over and over. Well, why wasn't there a training matrix? Well, the first shift supervisor failed to update the training matrix as required at the first of the month. Well, why did they fail to update the training matrix? Well, before the end of the prior month, the HR manager would email the training matrix template to all the supervisors. But this particular month, it didn't happen. Why not? Again, you see I'm asking why over and over again. Well, the HR manager left the company before the end of the month and a replacement didn't email the template to all the supervisors. Well, why didn't the replacement email the template to all the supervisors? Well, the procedure for training didn't include a requirement to prompt the new HR manager to email the template to all the supervisors. All right, let's take a look at our second example. The document control system is not completely effective. What allowed us to make that statement about the system? Well, it's the symptom that we saw. The quality auditor in the blue cell was using an uncontrolled form to record the results of first piece inspection. Well, why were they using an uncontrolled form? Well, the controlled hard copies of the form had all been used in the blue cell, so the quality auditor resorted to an uncontrolled form that must have been lying around. Well, why did they do that? Well, the quality auditor was not aware that when no hard copies of a particular form were available, the latest version of all forms could be accessed through the company's database. Well, why didn't they know to do this? Well, the quality auditor in the blue cell was not given a username and password to access the database. Why? HR didn't have a policy to ensure that all new hires are granted a username and password. So some of the things that we will not accept as root cause, oversight. I see that a lot. Operator oversight. Why did we fail to update a training record? Oh, it was just oversight. That's never acceptable. We misunderstood the requirement. Honestly, this could be acceptable if it's an initial audit or the first audit after a transition to a new standard. You may not understand the intent of a requirement, but by surveillance audit 37, this is not an acceptable root cause. I forgot. And then some of my personal favorites, another ISO 9001 blunder, our consultant messed up, or human error. Okay, so let's move on to corrective actions, and I'll finish my story. Corrective actions should address the root cause. And if they address the root cause, they should answer the question, what in the system failed such that the problem occurred? So many organizations will repeat their containment actions or corrections instead of giving the true corrective action that addresses the root cause. This is not acceptable. Not only should it address the system, but it should be irreversible. And it should involve a change in the system. Training by itself is generally not a system change. Incident-specific actions or corrections are not irreversible. So in my particular example, we did not turn the problem off like a light switch. When we reconfigured the manufacturing cell arrangement, we were still packing parts in the wrong boxes. So we convened our problem-solving team again, and it was a third shift material handler who said, you know what? If it was impossible to pack a left-hand part in a right-hand box and a right-hand part in a left-hand box, this issue wouldn't occur. So we worked with a packaging engineer, and we created dividers for the Gaylords where we were packing the material, layers of cardboard for each layer of product that was packed. And we added some dividers that made it impossible to put a left-hand part in a right-hand box and vice versa. And wouldn't you know it, we turned the problem off like a light switch. And we, in fact, recreated the defect. When we removed that new packaging, we saw that the issue repeated itself. So we turned the problem back on. So we made a permanent system change, and that change was in our pack out boxes. Training by itself is generally not a system change. People and systems tend to return to where they feel comfortable. And if you're in the automotive industries, and truth be told, many other industries today, corrective action should prompt changes to the FEMAs and control plans and may require a new PPAP. There should be at least one corrective action for each root cause or possible root cause that was demonstrated, that was identified. And subsequent data should show that the problem has 100% disappeared, so that we're turning the problem off like a light switch. So let's take a look at corrective actions for the two nonconformities we've been following throughout this training. The system for recording employee training and competence is not completely effective. In our corrective action, Section 4.6 of the procedure for training was updated to include a requirement for the HR manager to email the training matrix template to all supervisors for updating before the end of each month. The new HR manager was trained on this added requirement, and she added an automatic reminder to Outlook to perform this task. So the question we want to ask ourselves is, does this corrective action address the root cause? Well, let's go back to our root cause. Our root cause is the procedure for training didn't include a requirement to prompt the new HR manager. And you'll see that now the procedure for training has been updated. We've got a training event to go with that procedural change and a reminder in Outlook. So we don't have just training as part of our corrective action. Remember, people were probably trained to begin with, and people and systems tend to return to where they feel comfortable. We've got a permanent system change with the procedure change and the addition of a reminder to Outlook. And in our second example, the document control system is not completely effective. The organization's corrective action is the new hire work instruction was revised to include a requirement to grant new hires a username and password for the database as appropriate. All HR personnel were trained on this change. Does this corrective action address the root cause? HR didn't have a policy to ensure all new hires are granted a system username and password. And now we have a revision to a work instruction to include a requirement to grant new hires a username and password for the database, and a training event that goes along with it, but not just a training event. So when training is part of the corrective action response, the response should contain a technique that will be used to verify training effectiveness. So it's always great if you can implement some type of exam or follow-up to truly assess the effectiveness of the training. In that same manufacturing environment where I used to work, we were seeing that auditors were really having a hard time recording the lot number of the raw material they were using for traceability purposes. And that's because depending on the product, the lot number was different every time. Sometimes there was something that very specifically said lot number. Sometimes if that wasn't given, we used the date of manufacture. But it really depended on the manufacturer. So we trained on this, all the possible things the lot number could be, and then we gave some exams. We gave the operators a variety of labels, and they were to look at the label and write down what the appropriate lot number is, and they should be recording on their log. So there was an exam to evaluate training effectiveness. All right, let's talk a little bit about preventive actions. So preventive actions address one of two questions. What other systems exist that might have the same root cause present? Or what systems could I have had in place that would have prevented this from happening? So a common pitfall is that many corrective action reports will put corrective actions for preventive actions. But keep in mind, preventive actions address the future, not the past. What could still happen, not what did happen. Because if it's an action taken to address something that already did happen, it would be a corrective action. So preventive actions address the system, not the incident. And they involve changing the system to prevent future problems. Keep in mind that preventive actions are not identified only because of nonconformities. Management system standards require a proactive process for either preventive action, if that's a requirement, or managing risk with inputs from multiple sources. Near miss reports, 5S programs, lean initiatives, employee suggestions, customer walkthroughs. So in other words, no nonconformity should never mean no preventive action. Okay, let's conclude with a discussion on verification of corrective action implementation. This is a very critical, but unfortunately, it's not a often performed step in the problem-solving process. And many corrective action forms that I've seen don't have an appropriate spot to prompt verification activities. So when you're doing a sound verification exercise, you need to be looking at all of the following. The containment actions, corrections have been taken so that you've treated the symptoms of the problem. You've taken Tylenol or a leave to bring down your fever and ease your sore throat pain. Proper root cause analysis has been performed. You're turning the problem off and then can turn it back on again. Irreversible systemic corrective actions that address the root cause have been implemented. And if containment actions or corrections of the costly added layer of inspection type, they've been removed, and that you've given consideration if there are any opportunities for preventive action. So keep in mind that, as I said, corrective actions, while they need to be irreversible, are often reversible. And when we're making system changes, we're changing how work is performed. And for many people, change is difficult. Systems tend to return to where people are comfortable. So you want to continue to verify actions even after you get positive results on the first verification. So if you take that case where the automotive manufacturing environment where I was working, where employees were struggling with recording the lot number consistently, we do the training and implement the exam and turn them loose, we may get good results 1 or 2 weeks later, but are we still getting good verification results 6 months later? So don't be in a rush just to close something on your log to say you've closed it. If it's something that you need to verify several times in order to gain confidence, please do so. I'd like to acknowledge that some of the slide content has been provided by the IAOB. And I'll now open the floor to any questions or comments that you have on today's presentation or anything that I can help you with. Again, please type your questions into the question feature or chat feature. Okay, I've got a question. What is the deadline of a car? So if it's an internal audit or a customer audit, obviously you would want to follow your internal audit procedure or whatever requirements that the customer flows down. For most PJR nonconformities, with some exceptions, aerospace, TL9000, majors for IATF, it's about 60 days. Somebody's asking, and I'm not sure I understand the question, how root cause analysis should be performed. Root cause analysis should be done whenever there's a nonconformity to understand what the cause of the nonconformity is. There are many techniques, Raj, for doing this. I illustrated one technique today, the why technique, simply because it's the easiest to explain and I think one of the best. Seeing a lot of questions about the slides. Again, copies of the slides and a recording of today's webinar will be available for download from our website, www.pjr.com. A great comment from Nedra. She says, we promote a see something, say something approach at our company. So we get a lot of symptoms reported. Would you consider that to be inappropriate since they are not characterized as a systemic issue? No, I don't. But what I think the next step is when somebody reports a symptom, is somebody who's been through this training to go in and see that on the floor and have them capture that symptom as in terms of a systemic issue so that you can implement problem solving. Somebody's asking me to show some slides of the 5 why method, and I did go through that in the presentation. I'll scroll back so you can see it and understand where it's at. So here we've got our nonconformity, and you see us going through a line of thinking, asking why over and over again on these slides. And then also here as well. Okay, Josh is asking, as an auditor, if you see many cars, when do you start thinking that car procedure is ineffective, or do you at all? So a lot of cars, Josh, doesn't necessarily mean that the car procedure is ineffective. I'll really want to dig into those cars. So if I'm seeing a lot of repeat issues, so let's say I'm seeing a lot of mixing of left-hand and right-hand parts over and over again, different part numbers, different customers, that's telling me there's a flaw in our problem solving. But if I'm seeing a lot of different incidents and after they're corrected, they don't recur, that's telling me that my car procedure is working. And certainly a youthful management system is going to have more cars than one that's very mature, where systems are well performing and there's a lot of lessons learned. So I'm looking for repeat issues, indicating that the first round of problem solving wasn't effective. And I'm also considering how long the system has been implemented. I hope that answers your question. Okay, a kind of a broad question here. How can I get the whole team seeing the importance of conformance with ISO and our QMS? I could probably do a whole 1-hour presentation on this. And I actually just trained some new employees before I gave this webinar. And one of the things that I communicated is you never want ISO to be similar to cramming for an exam. You should never have to prepare for your audit. You should be doing it all the time, following your system all the time, understanding what your processes are, monitoring them, measuring them, and when you're not hitting a target or an expectation, implementing actions to improve performance. And if you consistently do that, you consistently follow your system, you shouldn't have to prepare for an audit. So I'm very well aware that audits are not inexpensive. They're very expensive services that you have to pay for in many cases. So why not do things right and get benefit out of these very costly services? I hope that argument will help you. Okay, somebody's saying for the 5 why questions, how do you narrow the responses down? I think, Mary Lou, what you're getting at is how do you know if you've gone deep enough in your questioning? So I'm not intending to be funny here, but sometimes asking why over and over gets to be a little silly. And when you feel you've gotten to that point, you can rest assured that you've gone far enough in your why analysis. What also helps is making sure you have a lot of different people asking those why questions over and over. It shouldn't just be the management representative sitting alone in their office in front of their computer. It should be a team approach. Remember, in my example, it was the third shift material handler who said it was impossible to pack a left-hand part into a right-hand pack-out box. We wouldn't have this problem. So keep that in mind, a multidisciplinary approach to problem solving. And I always joke that, you know, I'm the mom of 2 young boys, and if I say no and they ask why over and over, hoping I'll say yes, when I finally say because I'm the mom and I said so, when you get to that point, you can have some confidence you've gone far enough. So Vanessa has some questions. She said she had a finding that we were using the wrong grading, I think, on the control plan in FEMA. I think you have a typo there. So if you're, please clarify, Vanessa, if I'm answering your question appropriately. Wrong grading on control plan in FEMA. So the containment would be to correct those. Yes, that 100%, that's correct. You need to adjust the numbers on your control plan in FEMA and use the appropriate grading. So that would be your correction or your containment. And not only the control plan in FEMA that the auditor found, but doing a complete look across. You would then need to do a root cause analysis and figure out why your team that was compiling the control plan in FEMA was using the wrong grading. And once you figured out why they were using a wrong grading, you would implement a corrective action to address that root cause. Certainly training would be part of that corrective action. Yes,
Hi, attendees webinar. Just a quick technical issue. Shannon should be back online in a short moment, so if you can bear with us, she can answer some more of your questions. I think there was a power flicker in the office where she's broadcasting from, so hopefully she'll be back with us shortly.
Okay, I'm back. I hope you can hear me. We had a power glitch in the office and I briefly lost power and was kicked off. I'm going to continue answering questions. Bear with me one moment as I access the questions again. Yeah, getting back to Guillermo's question, it is possible to reach the real root cause in less than 5 whys. So Vanessa has responded to my request and she said that their root cause was lack of training. So I think what you're saying, Vanessa, is that the people who were compiling the control plan in FEMA's were not trained on that very specialized, highly technical task. You would want to ask why they weren't trained. Was there not funding for the training? Did you rely too much on their background and experience? Perhaps going a little bit deeper with that. And part of your corrective action response, but not the entire corrective action response, should be training. Vanessa, again, you're raising a good point. Containment might not be 100% correct if we do it before the training. Yeah, obviously, if you need to revise control plans in FEMA's, people need some training first. Wait and see if any other questions will come in. How can I overcome the challenge of coordinating 4 sites remotely? Naria, I'm going to answer this from a corrective action perspective, unless you want to provide a little more specificity to your question. Yeah, today's world, it's very challenging to work remotely. It's very challenging to manage maybe multiple facilities while you're working from home and you can't be there. So use tools very similar to this: GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar, have meetings with people, have problem-solving meetings with people, make sure that plants are continuing to do their own internal audits. It might have been a situation where people from plant A were auditing people from plant B and vice versa. During the pandemic, this may not be possible. So you have to find independent people from within the plant to audit the areas. Bring everyone together for problem solving and make sure that all plants, all disciplines are involved. I always think it's great when people turn their camera on. It's nice to see faces. It's nice to have that engagement as well. Vanessa has some additional questions about where training would go on a control plan example. Obviously, you have to get your people trained. It could be part of the containment or the correction. That's fine, Vanessa. But then your root cause should address why weren't people trained in the first place before they began this highly specific task. And then your corrective action would address that root cause. Any other questions? I'll wait a few more minutes to see if any come in, and again, apologize for the delay. Also very happy to answer any questions you have about remote auditing or virtual audits. Wait just a few more minutes to answer any other questions that may come in. Again, a copy of today's slides and a recording of the presentation will be available at pjr.com. Okay, folks, I thank everyone for your time today. Appreciate you tuning in to the root cause analysis and corrective action webinar. Please visit our website, www.pjr.com, for more free, exciting webinar topics in the future.